Good evening, Galion. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary coming to you from City Hall on a Martin Luther King holiday. It was a good day for a holiday in terms of how it coincided with the weather, and although I think many of the people uh, that are watching tonight, may have worked. Certainly, it was quite a weekend to follow up and have an extra day here. City workers worked by contract. Our city employees worked today as an ordinary day, and so we were able to get another day, basically a third day of concentration on the big storm over the weekend. I was down at Phil's Deli before the storm, getting loaded up a little bit, and for the second time this winter, I've missed it. I didn't think it would be a snowmageddon, so to speak, but that was a pretty substantial storm for us. We really operate not on a large plow basis or with large dual axle trucks. Our fleet, if you will, are 4 pickup trucks that will attach plows to, four dump trucks, and then 8 or 9 pickup trucks, depending on how much activity and what the condition of the streets are. Today in the office, the main request was for when everyone's alley was going to get hit, meaning plowed, and so we were working on that. I think at the end of the day, we've whittled that down to a pretty good level. If you haven't had your alley and your alley is necessary to get in and out, from your garage, then make sure you call 468-1857, and we'll go ahead and get those alleys that haven't been treated yet taken care of before we get some midweek rain or whatever the heck is going to come over the next few days. So overall, I want to echo some of the comments that I've seen on Facebook, and really commend our service department and our snow plow drivers. Also, really appreciated the assistance of the police department. It's really an integrated effort when you have that much snow. So we've been working together for many years, but certainly over the last 3 or 4 days, and I saw a good posting on Facebook, real positive in terms of some of our patrol people helping someone out that really needed shoveled out. So I think that's a good indication of the spirit of the city workers, and I want to thank them along with other council members and private citizens who've acknowledged their efforts. So coming into the weekend, we knew we were going to have a big storm, but my mind was focused on some things that had come to my attention the last part of last week, and that was some feedback from the Covert Manufacturing about a report that they'd received from Ohio EPA, basically as a result of complaints from neighbors about an odor that had been plaguing them, a musty smell. And so I spent some time talking with Kim Fox at Coverts, and they really have a clean report, if you will. That's not to say that there isn't some smells down there that, based on the weather patterns or based on working to try to get this new solvent that they're working with properly calibrated, if you will, and that's my term, not the industry term. I think the fact is we're going to have some of that odor out there, but by and large, what was noted both by the EPA and by the manufacturer of the solvent that's used to keep the machines running, and quite honestly, the steps that Coverts have taken make what is considered by many a bad problem and prevents it from being much worse. So I think there's beyond some dialogue that may be set up through these Facebook Live conversations. I think beyond that, the business is willing to have a public hearing, and I guess what I finished my comments by saying, if people who are affected, who continue to have concerns about the health issues or just about the odor in the neighborhood, I think please call our office, and we will work with the business or the industry to try to set up some sort of public meeting and at least get the questions answered about what the problems are in terms of any health considerations. I think at this point that's really not a major problem. But I wanted to mention it, that they'd reached out to City Hall, they meaning Coverts, and the report that I was supplied from EPA. It's really a one-page summary of their findings, that it indicated that they were doing a lot more than other industries that are regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency. And then they and then they offered up the idea that if public meeting was desired, it certainly would be a positive thing to increase information about what's going on out there and what the trade-offs that are involved in having that kind of major industry. We were talking the other day in the office. Really now Coverts has more people out there working, and this is an important part of the local economy as Perfection. That was the previous industry there. Many of the old timers in the community remember it, but it's a key part of our employment sector, and so we really want to work hard to balance their ongoing success, and their really have major expansion going on out there right now, but also that recognize the issues that the neighborhood have brought to our attention. I think that's really what a public meeting might do. So enough said on that. I think we could also handle a lot of questions about that topic in this forum. So those are really two of the major, I think, items that I wanted to report on, and that is, I think, our response to the snow, and it's a lot more of it than we thought, and I'm going to stop being the prognosticator because I've been missing it each time this winter. And then also the offer from Covert to set up a public meeting and conversation about what they are doing, because I don't think that's real well known, and then what further could be done to make the problem less of a problem in that part of Galion. So I'll stop right there, see if we have any more or any questions to start with. And I want to say before we get to questions, this was winging it. This presentation tonight, it reminds me sort of the years of early aviation, where you were going to take one plane and all of a sudden that didn't work, and so a new setup was put together. So this was really putting it together on the fly, and hopefully it's going well in terms of viewers, but it will be a little bit different, a little awkward, if you will, for questions. So let's try to give one a try. Okay,
Mayor, the first question comes from Dawn, and it's really two questions, both related to Brant Road and 598. The first part of it is there any news on the light at Brant and 598? And then the second part, is it possible to post a sign with traffic off of 598 stating dangerous intersection ahead?
Well, this is really one of the examples, excuse me, that may be a little bit tongue-tied, because I'm not quite sure how to address Dawn's question. I'm sure she's absolutely sincere in asking it, but from my perspective, it seems like we've talked about that intersection every 2 weeks, and be happy to continue to update people, but it really is one of the main reasons that we need to do these kinds of Facebook Lives, or broadcasting, if you will, or streaming rather is the right word, I guess, council meetings, committee meetings, those things, so that citizens can be updated on important issues. Now, the short answer to the 598 Brant Road intersection light is that it is under design. It's been approved. It qualifies, if you'll accept that term, based on a traffic study that was done late last year, and we're now in the process of having a signal design put together and then bid later this year. And I fully expect the widening that will probably be necessary for turn lanes on 598, both north and south, and the installation of the signal is something that can be accomplished I said a few weeks ago by Labor Day. I don't really see any reason that that's too ambitious. So the heart of the question is a light will be up later this year. Signage, I can get quickly into the weeds, so to speak, about what qualifies as signs and what kinds of signs would qualify for that sort of dangerous intersection designation. The short of my opinion is that we're going to focus on the light, and my hope is that the light will be up really before that kind of intersection sign could be warranted and put up. So I really believe we're well on the way of getting that tackled. And next to the grocery store, when are we going to get another new grocery store? That's probably the most legitimately asked question. But unlike the grocery store, which I don't have an immediate answer to, the traffic signal should be up later this year. Again, let's hope by September of this year.
Okay. Our next question comes from Samantha. For the next snow, is it possible to list which alleys are being plowed for that workday ahead of time, so we can better prepare, so we can be better prepared, so we don't miss work or getting kids to school?
Yeah, I guess that's something really to consider. The next time we have a 12-inch snowfall, I hope that's next winter or my next term of office or something like that. What I would want to say, first of all, it's an unusual amount of snow, and that the alley situation is really something that I think, based on knowing where we may have had some feedback and the importance of the alleys, I think we'll be more mindful of that next time. I don't know if publishing a list of the alleys and when we're going to get there, I'll have to see how practical that is. But not to minimize the alley situation. If you're dependent on a garage to get out, to get to school or work or whatever, I certainly understand that. But in some respects, it's good to hear that the major complaints we heard today, and Samantha's question is really the same one, involves the alleys and doesn't involve as many what could have been complaints about the major state routes within the city and or the major residential streets. So I think we did a pretty good job on those, but we will work on, when in the heavier snows, how to get more quickly to the alleys. That question, I understand that. The only other thing I'd say, unless there's another one about ice and snow removal, is that when annexations are done, I think some people perhaps read in the paper, the various media, that a major annexation out in the Galion crestline area at 61 and 30 was rejected by the county commissioners. It's really the same acreage that detached from the city a few years ago because of the city's reluctance to borrow $130,000 to serve 6 customers. So that issue remains unresolved out there. What I wanted to get to with ice and snow is that the farther the city extends itself from its core, from where the major residential areas are, the more resources, the different types of trucks, and the amount of salt that you have to have treating 598 and treating 61. So while it's a good thing that 598 is that Brant Road intersection is part of the city, that's a good thing. I don't think anyone would argue that too much. One of the consequences is that now the city is responsible for ice and snow effectively all the way out to 30. So that extends us a little bit on that highway corridor that, quite frankly, users of the highway expect a certain level of ice and snow treatment. So it's not as though we can abandon that. We have to keep focus on that corridor as well as the 61 corridor. That does pull us away to a very great extent from some of the surface streets, and certainly away from the alleys in terms of what we can get done over a day and a half period. So good question, long answer. we're mindful of the alleys, and we'll work to do better next time.
Okay, Mayor, our next question comes from Cindy. Is there any new information on the real estate tax increase?
I don't think there is a real estate tax increase. There's no voted. I'm not quite sure what the question is. There's no voted tax increase that I know that affect the schools. Now, one thing that's happened with everyone, and I think all of us that are property owners are feeling a little bit of the weight of that, is that by and large, and this is anecdotes, this is talking to people in the streets and looking at my own tax bill, I think many of the residential values went up. That's really a result of a 6-year process. What happens once every 6 years that is conducted by the county auditor that reappraises property. That may cause an increase in your tax bill, but in the old multiplication days, that's really more the multiplier going up than the multiplicand. The bottom line, the product is that your tax bill may have gone up if the assessed value of your property went up. There's nothing at the city level that would involve an increase in property tax. But the only thing we're talking about is really kind of the other way around, and that is looking at a higher tax reduction or abatement for construction of new homes in the city, new residential, and then in small multifamilies that are built on vacant property. So that's a concept that we've been working on in this office for several weeks and months. Quite honestly, there's about 250 acres in the city that we think is really developable, and we want to start a dialogue with the school board and with city council to talk about having higher levels of tax abatement there to trigger the kind of investment in new residential properties that I think generally understood as being a real important thing. So.
Okay, Mayor.
I knew I would work in our need for new housing into a question about increased taxes. Heck, the answer is really working at lowering taxes on certain parcels so that we can stimulate that new housing growth that Galion really needs.
Okay. These are going to be our last two questions here for tonight, and then we'll make sure that the other questions that have come in will come back up in the next one.
Great.
The first question, first of the last two, comes from Jim. What's the possibility of making all streets snow streets instead of just a few?
Hadn't thought about that. I guess my immediate answer, after and looking at one of my coworkers in the office who's been answering phone calls all day, I think if we increase the number of snow streets, what would happen? Probably not much of anything, except it would raise an expectation that there was going to be enforcement on all streets. What we're trying to do is keep open streets with limited parking, and quite honestly, the logic of why certain streets are emergency snow streets and others aren't probably hasn't been looked at thoroughly in a while. The flip side of snow streets is how it can thin out resources to a point that other important things happen. The police have to enforce that ordinance, and for the most part, during those kinds of snow emergencies, they're involved in a lot of other stuff that may be of a greater priority than being able to go curb to curb in terms of cleaning the street. I think the biggest answer, without getting into an argument or a fight with this other side of the argument, is applying common sense. If you don't want your car plowed in, then get it off the street. We'll get the street plowed from curb to curb, and you can get back on it. The amount of time, the hassle that's generated in calling out a tow truck, having that issue when you're going to tow a car, it really could be solved if somebody found an alley or found a spot to park their car on an emergency basis. I mean, quite honestly, anyone who was paying at least a little bit of attention knew for 3 or 4 days we were going to have a heck of a storm on Saturday. Now, I kind of missed. I thought it'd be more 5 inches, and ends up being more than twice that. But in any case, you knew it was coming. I really think the solution, rather than making all streets pass another ordinance that's difficult to enforce, is just a little bit of common sense, a little bit of courtesy. If you're on a high traffic street, make arrangements, get it off. We'll come through, we'll get it plowed. We can get you back out to your normal parking space a lot easier, a lot less hassle, and a lot safer. So kind of a long answer, but I'm not generally, and this would be a specific example where I really don't think another ordinance and other things for the police to do is necessarily the way to result in what's just being a good neighbor and a good citizen in a small town like we're lucky to live in. So.
Okay, Mayor, our last question comes from Marcia. What's the possibility of putting a light there at the intersection where Save-A-Lot and Dairy Queen are located?
I think without any kind of through street, that's unlikely. Our solution really is 1.5 years away, and that is to widen that so that there's a third lane. If you can just go back a few years and remember the area between the Four Corners and Heisey Park, where getting able to turn into the bank or Little Caesars or McDonald's or back into the Galion West Shopping Center, you know, how a devil of a time getting in and the backups. I think with that third lane, that has opened it up both for safety. I think that is really the solution to safety and access out there, and it's the trade-off between development and trying to do it in an orderly way, but getting it done to impose too many regulations on the front end, I think, slows down and may not have allowed that development to go forward. So unfortunately, what we're going to do is coming back in with turn lanes in both directions. I think that's our best engineered safety solution. Really no public street to put up a traffic light and provide access. So I think that just opens probably the can of worms of the discussion about future development right in there, and how to make sure we don't grow ourselves into a bottleneck and have a positive step forward, but then have halfway's choke to be able to get out of it. So get out of that area and move around in a flexible way. So I'm getting the hook. It's time to get going, I guess. I do appreciate the interest. There's some questions that, if they're real timely, we'll make sure we get responses up on our website. If not, those questions will sit at the beginning of the list, and I guess that'll be the lead in our presentation here in a couple of weeks. So again, thanks for watching and helping make this a success to share information throughout our hometown. Good night.